Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's Board of Appeals hearing. Before we begin, let me introduce some members of town government that act as advisors to this board. To my left is Paul Hennings, counsel to the board. To his left is David Flynn, assistant planning director. To his left is Tom O'Brien, a planner in the planning department. And to his left is John Bongino, town building director. Now let me tell you why you're here tonight. New York State statute requires that any town that adopts zoning must also have a board of appeals to act as a relief valve so that those persons aggrieved by strict application of the zoning ordinance can seek relief without the expense of going to court. Town board can give Board of Appeals additional powers such as special exception approvals, site plan approvals, etc. In Smithtown, the town board has given this board authority regarding certificate of existing use and some special exception uses. The most common kind of application before the board are area variances. Area variances deal with dimensions such as lot area, frontage, height, setback, and parking spaces. The New York State statute mandates that the board must consider the following 5 criteria in area variances. When you come to the podium to present your application, you need to address these 5 areas. They are posted here for you. Number 1, whether an undesirable change will be reduced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties will be created. Number 2, whether the applicant has other feasible alternatives. Number 3, whether the variance is substantial. Number 4, whether an adverse impact on the environment will be created. And number 5, whether the alleged difficulty is self-created. The statute requires the board to balance the interest of the applicant and those of the neighborhood or community. This statute further requires that the board shall grant the minimum variance it shall deem necessary and adequate, and at the same time preserve and protect the character of the neighborhood and the health, safety, and welfare of the community. The board has the power to impose reasonable conditions for granting variances. Special exception applications are different than area variances. When we have a special exception application, I will explain the different criteria to you. Regarding procedure, cases will be called in order that they are advertised. When your case is called, please come forward, submit your affidavits and mailing receipts to Mr. O'Brien, and then you will be sworn in at the podium. You will be given the opportunity to explain to this board why you need the variance. After the applicant is done speaking, all interested parties will be given one opportunity and only one opportunity to be heard. So please, organize your thoughts, keep your remarks factual that are related to the case. Then I will ask the applicant to come back to the podium to answer your concerns. The board will close the cases and reserve the decisions, some decisions. After all the hearings are closed, the board will review the cases and decide some of them. Others will be reviewed at a later date. There are 3 ways to find out the results of the case. Number 1, you can wait until after public hearing, but there's no guarantee that the board will act on your case tonight. Number 2, you can call the planning department tomorrow afternoon. And number 3, applicants can wait and be notified by mail. We do have one adjournment that I will tell you the adjournment. Case 16720, FMF Properties. That's on 152 Highland Drive in Kings Park. Was there anyone here for that case? All right. That has been adjourned to July 10th. Okay. First case tonight. Case 16712, Smith Haven Auto Bodies, 784 Middle Country Road, St. James. Location, south side of Middle Country Road, west of Cambon Place, St. James. Property zone WSI. Request variance to increase the maximum allowable display area for motor vehicle sales from 3 times the gross floor area to 6.5 times the gross floor area. And your name, please?
Brett Saslow, 22 Stonegate Court in Smithtown.
Okay. First of all, get that mic so we can hear you, please, if you don't mind. Will you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. Are you an officer of this corporation?
Yes, I am.
And your position?
President.
Okay. Now, would you, yes, spelling of your last name.
SASLOW.
Okay. Now, would you like this gentleman to speak for you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Mark Mancini, architect, town of Smithtown, 222 Middle Country Road, Smithtown.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Touchy microphone tonight.
Okay, you want to tell us why you're here, please?
We're here to, Mr. Saslow owns, quite a few dealerships in Smithtown. The Chrysler dealership right down the road here has another facility that we built about 5 years ago. Next to that is a 1-acre piece of land that is currently just a wooded piece of land, zone WSI. And what we would like to do is create a parking lot in that area and attach it to the building that we built about 5 years ago. And use the parking lot for now for storage with the prospect of building a building in the near future. As you know, the car dealerships in Smithtown have actually survived the economic downturn fairly well. Some have gone in and out. Mr. Saslow has probably one of the best dealerships in town. He keeps everything very nicely. He has been able to keep a great inventory, and in this world that we're in today, if you notice when you go to buy a car, you go on the internet and you check the inventory, and that's the name of the game. So this parking lot will greatly enhance his ability to keep prices low and keep his dealership going and competitive with other towns. It's not an undesirable change. The WSI zoning for this property is in place already. If you look at the site plan, you'll notice that we're keeping a wooded buffer in the back, although it doesn't really show trees right now in the early site plan. We are looking to keep an area in the rear so that the trees remain. And you'll notice that the property directly behind it is actually owned by Mr. Saslow too, and then behind that is a berm with trees on it, and then a condominium behind that. So the idea is, even though he doesn't have to put a natural buffer zone, we would like to keep that so that the houses aren't affected greatly when we excavate the site and put parking in. The requested variance is caused by, because you're allowed the 3 times rule, 3 times the square footage of a building. Since we're not putting a building on right away, we're going to attach that to the building next door, so the 3 times is now becoming 6 times. Eventually that is going to go away when the building is constructed later on, and the variance won't be needed, but for today we need to construct the parking lot and get the facility going so that, and I'll tell you a brief story. Mr. Saslow had the opportunity of getting a Fiat dealership not too long ago, and the owners of the dealerships decided to go to Brookhaven instead of Smithtown. It affects us, unfortunately, when we're not able to have the facility. So if we have the parking, we would have the ability to bring more dealerships into town. That's about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Planning? Gentlemen. Is there anyone here that would like to be heard on this application? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing.
So moved. Second.
It's regularly moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Next case is case 16713, Robert Israel, 64 Dogwood Road, Kings Park. Location: west side of Dogwood Road, north of Washington Drive, Kings Park, property zone R10. Request variance to increase the maximum height of an existing 6-foot fence atop of a 4-foot retaining wall from 6 feet to 10 feet. Good evening. Your name, please?
My name is Robert Israel, Israel, and I live at 64 Dogwood Road in Kings Park.
Right. Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman and members of the board, I'm here this evening to request a variance to increase the maximum height from 6 foot to 10 foot for a 6-foot fence located on a 4-foot retaining wall. 38 years ago, I purchased our property. My wife and I purchased our house from Jean Mankusky, who was the widow of the former well-known and respected fire chief in Kings Park. And the year before we purchased the property, the Mankuskys had put in a swimming pool. And that swimming pool was surrounded by a 5-foot chain link fence. A copy of the survey that we had conducted in 1974 is attached to our application for your perusal, should you want to see that. And it shows the fence and the retaining wall. 34 years later, when the children were out of the house and had graduated college, we decided it was a good time to try to do some things that we hadn't been able to do. So the first thing we did was to improve the call on a company to bring the retaining wall up to a new-like condition. And so we wouldn't have maintenance going forward as we began retirement years. The second thing we did was to replace that rusted old chain link fence with a PVC fence, which was 5 foot in height, had 5-foot solid panels, and a 1-foot decorative lattice top. That was in 2008. We did that because we thought that it would give us more privacy and give our neighbors more privacy also with the additional height of 1 foot, and that it would be enhance the appearance, be maintenance free, which was very important, and give us a little bit more value to our home. In addressing the considerations this evening, we did not believe that that the variance would produce a negative impact on our neighbors, because all of our neighbors had purchased the homes, their homes, knowing that we had a 5-foot fence surrounding the pool versus the current 6-foot fence. And we don't believe that the 1-foot height difference is, we believe it's minimal. During the years we have owned our home, all the homes surrounding us, with the exception of one, that's Barbara and Richard Cattell on Elm, have changed hands 2 or 3 times. And in all that time, we have had no complaints regarding what we've done around the property. The request is not substantial, we don't believe, because the 5-foot fence was there for 40 years. We just simply, in 2008, replaced a 5-foot fence with a 6-foot fence. So the 1 foot, we believe, is minimal and not substantial. The benefit cannot be achieved any other way, because the original design of the fence to protect the pool from unauthorized access is in place today as it was then, and we don't think there's any other way to do it. The variance would not cause any effect on the environment, since the conditions really that are there now were there for the past 40 years, and there was no adverse effect on the environment. The difficulty was perhaps we don't think it was self-imposed because what we thought we were doing was replacing something that already existed. And we didn't know that the codes had changed in that time. So we don't believe that it's self-imposed. In summary, I'd request that the board give us favorable consideration based on the facts for our request this evening.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm here to, if you would like to, answer any questions the board may have.
Well said. Planning?
Thank you, Madam.
Gentlemen? Okay.
Thank you.
We do visit the site, so I just want you to know we
Right.
were at your home. All right. Is there anyone here that would like to be heard on this application? Okay. I would like you to state your name and spell your last name.
My name is Peter Colgan.
Just lift the mic. You don't even have to. Go
Peter
ahead.
Colgan,
Spell it.
Colgan.
Uh-huh.
I live the property,
Excuse me.
yeah,
I need your address.
65 Elm Road, Kings Park, New York.
Okay, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I live at 65 Elm Road, which is directly behind his property. And about 8 months ago, I purchased the piece of property directly next to my house where his supposed retaining wall is constructed. During the title search, my title company and survey company came in and found out that his retaining wall and fence are encroaching on my property. And in order for him to get this variance, I have a survey that says it's encroaching. That's a legal matter. And also, I don't want a liability of somebody climbing over a 10-foot fence and landing on my property and suing me. So that's my complaint.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Well, there goes a 38-year perfect record.
All right. Go ahead.
The complaint really is the fence that borders my neighbor's property in the rear is 71 feet. Of the 71 feet, all but 11 are used to protect the new pool that he put in.
Excuse me. Let me just
Sure.
ask you this. Is any of that retaining wall not on your property?
No.
And do you have a survey to that?
I have two surveys.
All right.
I have a survey that was conducted in 1974, which shows that the retaining wall is on my property, and I have a new survey that was done in February of this year by a firm in Garden City that also shows that the retaining wall is online. So I'm sorry that there's a disagreement with him and what he believes, but I have two surveys.
Okay. Make sure that we have those surveys.
Yeah, it's part of the record.
In there. Okay. Okay.
It does.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? All right. I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing.
So moved. Second?
It's vaguely moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Next case is case 16714, Michael and Barbara Baumgarten, 12 Pulaski, no, I'm sorry, Pataki, I'm sorry, it's Pataki Street, Kings Park. Location, west side of Pataki Street, north of Main Street, Kings Park. Property zone RM7. Variance to reduce the minimum front yard from 25 feet for 3 for a proposed 114 square foot enclosed porch. Reduce the total side yard from 18 feet to 15 for an existing 396 square foot deck. Your name, please?
My name is Michael Baumgarten, 12 Pataki Street, Kings Park, New York.
Okay, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Are you going to speak? I don't think so. Okay.
Which is also on the
If you
application.
decide you want to speak, I'm going to have to swear you in, all right? Thank you. All right? You want to tell us why you're here, please?
We're here to request a variance to replace our existing enclosed front porch. When we purchased the house in 1987, it was already enclosed. The survey that we were given at the time of the purchase of the house was dated in 1979. We also showed the porch to be enclosed. In doing all the record search, that there's no CO for the porch. The town has it as an open porch from the time the records were kept in 1947. There was never any permits or paperwork pulled in order to enclose the porch. We're seeking to rebuild the existing porch the way it is, with the exception of relocating the front door from the front of the porch to the side, as the present stoop is encroaching on town land by approximately 1.5 feet.
Okay.
And the other half of the variance is also to reduce the side yard for a existing deck that's in the rear of the side and rear of the property, inside the 6-foot stockade fence. There's no undesirable change to the neighborhood. It's in keeping with the standard, the present designs of the houses that are there. There's really no other way to solve or to rebuild the porch except deconstructing it and rebuilding the whole thing. Being that it's already been existing since at least 1979, there's no adverse effect on the neighborhood. We believe that it's a minimal request, and obviously it was not created by us. It was created by somebody long before us who had owned the house at the time.
Okay, thank you. Planning? Gentlemen. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here that would like to be heard on this application? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing.
So moved. Second.
It's regularly moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Okay. Next case is case 16715, Jan Christan, 49 Crossbow Lane. Location, west side of Crossbow Lane, north of Coconut Drive, Comac. Property zone R21. Requests minimum side yards from 16 feet to 5 for proposed detached 771 square foot side entry garage with a covered patio. And your name, please?
Madam Chairperson, good evening. Bernard G. Rogers, architect.
I need the applicant.
Hi.
Hi, may I have your name, please?
J.N. Krishnan, Krishnan. I reside at 49 Crossbow Lane, Comac, New York.
Okay. Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. Now, would you like this gentleman to speak for you?
Please.
Thank you. May I have your name now and spell your last name
Yes,
for me?
Bernard G. Rogers, Rodgers, architect.
And your address?
2150 Wantor Park Drive, Wantor, New York, 11793.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Madam Chairperson, members of the board, good evening. I'm here this evening representing my clients Jane and Claudine Krishnan, the owners of 49 Crossbow Lane, Comac, New York, 11725, zoned R21 by the town of Smithtown. The Krishnans are proposing to convert their existing attached one-car garage to living space and at the same time they're proposing to build a new two-car attached garage with a rear roofed-over patio at the end of their existing driveway, which is at the side yard of their property. As a result, we are seeking relief of zoning Chapter 322-12B to allow an accessory structure in a required side yard, which at the same time will be seeking relief of zoning Chapter 322-9B, a reduction of the required 16-foot side yard to our proposed 5 feet. We believe that if granted, our proposal would not pose an impact on any adjacent properties. There would still be a distance of 26 feet between our proposed garage and the next-door neighbor's nearest structure, which also happens to be a garage. We believe that the benefit cannot be achieved by an alternative, as there really is no other place on the property to put this garage. Outside of the fact that the curb cut and driveway are already there, the property's grade greatly increases as you go past the rear building line of the house. Also, as you can see on our submitted plot plan and survey, there is an existing in-ground pool that exists behind the location of our proposed garage. We do not believe that our request is substantial in nature because our proposal conforms with both the original style of the house and is not massive in height. It is also in concert with 3 other houses on the block that have similarly located garages. I'd like to submit photos of 45, 50, and 53 Crossbow Lane that illustrate this point.
All right, go back and now then I'm going to question you with this. Okay. First of all, before I accept these pictures, they need to be labeled with each address.
They are.
I need to know when you took the picture
Okay.
and who took the picture.
Okay.
Okay? Now, the other thing I'm going to ask you is, did you do any research? Do you know if they have variances?
We do not know if they have variances. Our case is simply stated on the fact that they are similar of nature and that they're in the side yard and the massing is similar.
Okay.
We're not, however, saying that they're very similar to our numbers, our 5-foot number. Okay? We also believe that the variance in this situation would not create an adverse effect on the environment in any way, shape, or form. Our proposal location for the garage would maintain as much green yard as possible. It would be built on the existing paving that's already there. It would not be destroying any grassed areas or planted areas on the property. We feel the difficulty was not created by the Christians or a former owner, as the location, is dictated strictly by the fact that the existing curb cut and the driveway is already there. There really is no other place to put the garage, and again, as you go further back toward the rear yard where accessory structures are preferred, the grade greatly increases. I'd also like to submit a notified letter of consent from the next-door neighbor at 51 Crossbow Lane. The Christians have explained our proposal along with the reasons why we are here before you tonight seeking relief of code. They have said they completely understand and have no issues with it whatsoever. So in conclusion, I would just like to thank you very much for hearing our request
Right.
this evening.
I have a few things.
Mhm.
First of all, I don't understand why you can't move that garage a little bit closer to the house. 5 feet is really substantial. I know if you moved it a little bit closer to the house, you might have to do a little bit more paving,
Correct.
but
Well, one of the reasons why they're looking to keep a little bit of a distance away from the house is to not create any kind of narrow area right next to it. They obviously want to cut down on the massing and not have it seem like a massive structure all the way across. That's why they tried to keep a little bit of distance from it.
all right. I don't know how the other board members feel, but 5 feet is substantial. I'll let you know that. Planning?
2 comments, Madam Chair. First, the notice says that it's a side entry garage. It's not really a side entry. That's not a fatal problem.
Right.
But I think that the decision should reflect that it's not a side entry garage. The second thing is that, in my opinion, there's more impact on the neighbor of having a 5-foot side yard and a 10-foot breezeway, or alleyway than the other way around, or something, or narrowing the garage a little bit to provide a little more open space between the neighbor and the structure.
Gentlemen?
I have a question, maybe a comment. I agree with Mr. Flynn and the chairwoman that it's substantial, and I don't think we have approved 5 feet, or very, very rarely, and maybe it's in a unique circumstance that we would do that. Had you considered moving it closer to the house and maybe making it a breezeway attached?
If you don't mind, I'll ask my client to speak to that, because they would be the one that would have to really make the decision on that.
Only because I think if you move it closer, it kicks off another variance. It does, they've removed that. Well, then you could do it without the breezeway, but sometimes when it's narrow, if you make it a breezeway, it seems a little bit nicer.
Would you guys be open to that, to bringing it closer to the house as opposed to?
Thanks.
Okay. All right. All right, I guess these are the ones I just have to give back to you. If you would label them and then give them to Mr. Gargiulo, I'd appreciate it. Okay. Is there anyone here that would like to be heard on this application? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing.
So moved. Second.
It's ready, moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I can see that the next case is of high interest to this community. The applicant and the attorney will present their case, and then I will allow everyone to have one opportunity to be heard. However, there are a lot of people here, so it doesn't help if you all say the same thing. If, I don't know if you have someone that is representing the community. Do we have someone representing the community? That was wonderful. And then if you'd like to come up and state your name and address and say I agree or disagree, that would be appreciated. All right? Your remarks, you know that it must be factual, related to the variances. As a board, our decisions are based on 5 criteria that are posted here for you, for variances. It is very important that this hearing is very fair and orderly. There'll be no calling out, no talking from the audience. There'll be no applause or outbursts. Everyone needs to cooperate so the court reporter here can hear and record all your statements. I will then ask the applicant to come back and to answer your concerns. I thank you for your cooperation and your orderly and professional manner. I am going to do that. I'm going to read the whole case just as soon as he gets, I need to, let me get a piece of paper. Okay. Let me just call the case and then you can hand everything to me, okay? Okay. Next case is case 16716, Serrata Smithtown LLC. Location, southeast corner of Middle Country Road and Alexander Avenue, Nesconset. Property zone WSI. Request a special exception to permit a 2,100 square foot counter service restaurant. Variance of a special exception standard to permit a counter service restaurant to have outside dining. Variance to permit outdoor dining in WSI district. Permit 22 loudspeakers at location other than the drive-through windows. Reduce required landscaping islands from 9 to 1. Reduce landscaping area between the front property line and parking from 8% to 7% existing. Increase the number of ground signs from 1 to 32. Increase the maximum area of a ground sign from 40 square feet to 739 square feet. Increase the number of wall signs from 1 to 7. Increase the height of 2 wall signs from 15 feet to 20. Increase the height of 1 wall sign from 15 feet to 21. Permit 3 wall signs not facing a public street. And then there's the interpretation. Interpretation to determine if a curb service is permitted as an accessory use to a counter service restaurant. Okay, gentlemen?
Can I do a fence variance instead? Madam Chairman, members of the board. Bram Weber, Weber Law Group, 290 Broad Hollow Road, Suite 200E, Melville, for the applicant, Sirota Smithtown LLC. In attendance with me this evening, I have Spencer and Nancy Hart, the owners of the Sonic franchise on Long Island, Doug Haley, the head of design for Sonic, Mike Marinas of Barrett, Bonacci, and Van Weel, who has worked on the site plan, Chuck Olivo of Stonefield Engineering, who's done a traffic and parking study, Paul Boyce, PW Grosser Consulting, who did a sound study, and John Breslin from Breslin Appraisal, who testify as a real estate expert. I'll be offering the testimony of Mike Marinas, Chuck Olivo, Paul Boyce, and John Breslin as expert testimony, and request that the board accept the testimony of these individuals as such. I've submitted each of their credentials for the record. To the extent that you would like me to qualify these individuals further, I will do so. The Planning Department, in its recommendations to the board on this application, makes 2 incorrect determinations that, once resolved through reasoned application of the facts in the law, allows the application to be fairly considered on its merits. We will prove to the board that the application satisfies the zoning criteria for the WSI district, and where necessary, seeks reasonable variances from this board, which are the minimal relief necessary to develop the property, and which have been carefully analyzed and designed to minimize any impact on the adjacent neighborhood. But first, as you may know, the applicant reached out by letter and follow-up phone call to all homeowners within 400 feet of the property, double the distance required for notice of the hearing, to engage them on the merits of the application and to listen to their concerns. The applicant offered to communicate through a telephone number and email address established just for this application, and offered in-person meetings to discuss the application. In addition, members of the application team walked parts of the adjacent residential community, both within and outside of the 400-foot radius to which the outreach letters were mailed, to try to engage residents who had not responded to the letter. This outreach resulted in 2 informal meetings held with homeowners during a walking canvass of the neighborhood. Scheduled meetings were held with the owners of 3 houses on Dover Hill Drive, and a telephone call was scheduled and held with the residents of a 4th house on Dover Hill Drive. There were 4 voicemail messages left on the telephone number given in the letter. 2 of those messages were anonymous. 1 caller identified herself by name and expressed her concerns about the proposal and stated that she was not interested in a meeting. The 4th message requested a meeting, which was accomplished instead by a telephone call between the resident and the applicant. No emails were received. Despite the fact that only a few of the residents who received a letter, phone call, or personal visit responded to the applicant's community outreach efforts, the applicant remains willing to listen to the reasonable concerns of the neighbors and work with them on addressing those concerns. The Planning Department, in its recommendations, makes 4 determinations on which it believes the application should be denied. We respectfully submit that these determinations are incorrect on the facts and the law, and are the result of a misapplication of the town code and a misunderstanding of the details of the application. The first is that Sonic's use is in some way different from the exact town code definition of a counter-service restaurant. Town code definition of a counter-service restaurant is as follows: an eating establishment having a seating capacity of more than 16 seats, where food and/or beverages are served to patrons in their vehicles or are sold at counters inside the building, and patrons are not served at tables by waiters or waitresses. The definition can be broken down into 4 elements. An eating establishment, 1. 2, having a seating capacity of more than 13 seats. 3, where food or beverages are served to patrons in their vehicles or sold at counters inside the building. And 4, patrons are not served at tables by waiters or waitresses. The Sonic restaurant, which is the subject of this application, is a counter service restaurant exactly as defined in the code. It is clear and unambiguous. I'm going to use my first slide. We had to have a little fun, so just please go with us. It's clear and unambiguous.
You need to take the mic with you.
Sorry?
Thank you.
Sonic is an eating establishment having a seating capacity of more than 16 seats, where food and or beverages are served to patrons in their vehicles or are sold at counters inside the building, and patrons are not served at tables by waiters or waitresses. That's the definition of counter service restaurant. Sonic is each one of those. On the second issue, any requirement that this application requires relief from this board for curb service as an accessory use is not legally supportable. The town code does not define what curb service is, and it is therefore impossible to qualify Sonic as something for which the town code does not provide any definition. In fact, the town code has not had a definition for curb service restaurant for more than 39 years, since at least 1973. Sonic is in all manner of fact, intent, and actuality a counter service restaurant as defined by the code. Moreover, the inclusion of 28 indoor seats as part of this application is in keeping with a model that Sonic uses throughout the country and is as a part of the use as any other part. Sonic is not in any way changing its business to fit into Smithtown's definition of a counter service restaurant. Sonic has an operational model it has used more than 100 times, almost 200 times actually, in areas around the country, which includes indoor seating and which is in keeping with the town code definition of a counter service restaurant. The indoor seating at this Sonic location will operate to the same exacting standards as the other aspects of Sonic's operation. A patron of this Sonic location will have the benefit of utilizing the indoor seating, the drive-through window, or a drive-in parking stall, and having these choices will improve what is already a positive and enjoyable experience. Next, the planning department incorrectly identifies the proposed outdoor seating area as an outdoor dining area requiring a use variance. Simply put, the outdoor seating area is not an outdoor dining area. Patrons will not be able to order food from that area, nor will they be able to be served in that area. The outdoor seating is for people waiting for the orders they placed at the counter inside the building, and once the order is ready, they will pick the order up from the indoor counter. The outdoor seating could also be used by a patron who placed their order at the counter inside the building and chooses to eat their meal outside at one of the tables. An essential element of an outdoor dining area, as defined by the town code, is service of food to patrons seated at tables. There will be no service of food at these tables. Additionally, as will be described by Mike Marinas in his discussion of the site plan, the outdoor seating area will have no impact on any residential property, as the seating is located to the north of the building, well over 200 feet from any residential property line. So the third and fourth incorrect determinations made by the planning department, that the applicant is proposing an outdoor dining area not permitted at a counter service restaurant, and that the outdoor seating area being proposed requires a use variance, as if it were an outdoor dining area, should be dismissed by this board as a misunderstanding of the application. However, if the board, despite the clear evidence that this outdoor seating area will have no impact on the adjacent residences, in its deliberations will base any part of a denial of this application on the outdoor seating area, then the applicant will remove the outdoor seating area from the plan. To summarize our case on the important points I just discussed, the planning department is wrong in its recommendation that the application should be denied. 3 points. 1, Sonic is a counter service restaurant which meets the 4 elements of counter service restaurant as defined in the town code. 2, an interpretation is not required nor even possible for curb service as an accessory use, as curb service is undefined in the town code and any proffered definition is arbitrary. And 3, no variance should be required for an outdoor dining area, as no outdoor dining area is being proposed. Sonic is a good, solid company with a reputation for operational excellence built over more than 50 years. Sonic's Limeades for Learning charitable program supports public school teachers and their classroom projects in the communities in which Sonics are located. The husband and wife team who own the Long Island franchise are committed to each Sonic location being a fun, family-friendly location respectful of the community. The applicant has spent a tremendous amount of time and resources to prepare a reasonable plan for the development of this commercially zoned property and tried to engage in discussions with as many of the adjacent residents who are willing to participate in reasonable dialogue. I would now ask the board to allow John Breslin to present testimony as a real estate expert witness.
Good evening, Madam Chairman,
Good
members of the
evening.
board. My name is John Breslin. I'm the principal and president of Breslin Appraisal Company, Incorporated. Business address is 44 Elm Street in Huntington.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
In connection with this application, I was engaged by the applicants to make a study of the proposal and give an opinion with respect to the impacts on real property values in connection with the requirements under the Smithtown Code. And in doing that, I was provided, of course, with the application materials, the correspondence between the applicant and the town of Smithtown. I visited the subject property in the surrounding neighborhood, both the commercial area and the residential area. I also visited the Sonic site in Babylon, which is a developed existing Sonic site that's on Deer Park Avenue in North Babylon. I also recently reviewed the planning memo that was generated by the town in connection with this particular piece of property. The board has visited the site, I'm sure, and is very familiar with this location. You recently heard an application directly across the street for a restaurant, Bahama Breezes, which is the parking lot in the mall directly opposite this subject property, and you approved that application. As you know, the most dominant land use in this vicinity is the mall, which is directly across the street from the subject property. This particular property is on the south side of Middle Country Road at the corner of Alexander. The overall piece of property is 4.9 acres in size, and it's currently improved, if you will, with the Raguzzi restaurant. It was originally the Pizzeria Uno restaurant. And the applicant is proposing to develop, which is now a vacant portion of the property, the westerly end of the property at the corner, with this 2,100 square foot fast food style restaurant on that corner. And right now it's a wooded parcel, so it's a vacant wooded parcel, but as the board well knows, when you're dealing with a vacant parcel that backs up to residential community, there's certainly going to be a change. The board is aware of the fact that the property can be developed, and it can be developed with any of the uses in the WSI district. And many of those uses, I think the board, again, is well aware, are certainly more onerous than what's proposed here. What the applicant has designed, and I think has been designed in accordance with the development plan, and in this particular intense commercial area, is to provide a significant separation between the intense commercial development along Middle Country Road and the nice residential community that is to the south of that. And this plan will not alter or change that. In fact, the plan is to continue the buffer that exists now on the developed portion of the site on the easterly side of that property along what would be the new developed portion. There is a significant dense vegetative buffer that exists behind what's now the Raguzzi restaurant, which is roughly between 50 and 60 feet in depth. That buffer will continue along the entire back of the subject property all the way down to the corner and then continue around. It will be at least 57 feet in width, and also it will take advantage of the existing topographical change as one moves into that corner of the property. The elevation changes and moves up. So between the dense trees that exist, the planned supplement of evergreen screening that's shown on the site plan to fill in, and the natural change in topography, that will provide that significant separation between what will be the developed portion of the subject property and the residential community to the south. Clearly, there will be a change on the site because it will be a developed property. But this, at 2,100 square feet, that's a relatively small size building and land coverage as compared to what could be put there as of right. I'm sure the site engineer can explain that in more detail. As you know, the uses that in your district that could be put there are many of them are significantly more onerous than what is contemplated here. One of the things that I was asked to look at is this concept with respect to this type of a use compared to the idea of a counter service restaurant versus the concept of what is a curb service restaurant. And I looked in the code, and there is no definition of what's a curb service restaurant. And I looked at the only other places I've seen the term curb service is in some other restaurants in the town where there are chain restaurants in particular where they do offer curb service or takeaway service in conjunction with their restaurant operations, where you can call ahead, order takeout, if you will, from those restaurants, and they designated curb service or takeaway service areas on the property. And in the photos, which I'm going to submit, I've shown examples of that. For example, you have them at Outback, you have it at California Pizza, you have it at Carrabba's, you have it at Dave's Barbecue. Those are all examples of restaurants where that's the only place I could see anything that would be some type of curbside, where something was referred to as curbside. There's no other example of it, and there's no definition of it in the code. This particular use, I think, is more in line with another form of a drive-in restaurant or a drive-through restaurant. It's a different form of it. It's more akin to the original type of a drive-through restaurant than the current version. And as Mr. Weber went through the definition, I think it clearly meets the technical definition of a counter restaurant. When one looks at the requirements under the code, I think and your special permit criteria, I believe it meets all of those requirements. It's certainly not going to change the development pattern that was established by the zoning lines a long time ago. And I think the aerial that's on the map before you, and I'll go to that right now. This aerial, which will be submitted, shows the location of the subject property here outlined in red, as well as the existing Ragosi restaurant. It shows the location of the mall directly across the street, or at least the southerly portion of the mall parking lot. This is where the Bahama Breeze will be located. You can see the demarcation of the buffer that would be extended. This is the buffer behind the Ragosi, and that's planned to be continued along here, providing that separation between the commercial developed portion of the property and the residences to the south. And you can see that's consistent with it as it follows along the residential community as you move further to the east with the large shopping center that's just to the east of the subject, where you have Petco, Bob's, and of course the Costco, which is just to the east of the subject property surrounding the residential community. To the north, you have the auto repair use and auto use on the corner. You have now the Checkers restaurant, which is similar in nature to the subject, just a little bit to the northwest, and of course the mall here. So the development pattern has been clearly established to a certain depth along the south side of Jericho Turnpike or Middle Country Road in this area. This type of use is certainly something that you would expect to find on a state highway such as Middle Country Road. I certainly believe by locating it with these buffers, it's certainly not going to have any adverse impact on real property values. That's already been established by the existing development pattern. All the requisite municipal services are available to the subject property. I'd like to submit a series of 28 photos that I took within the last 2 weeks of the subject property and the immediately surrounding area. All of these photographs are individually labeled, and if I could, I'd like to submit those.
Thank you.
That would complete my presentation unless there's any questions from members of the board.
I don't believe there is any right at this point.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Michael Marinas from Barrett, Bonacci, and Van Riel will now come up to discuss the site plan.
Good evening. My name is Michael Marinas. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New York. I'm from the firm of Barrett, Bonacci and Van Weel, 175A Commerce Drive, Hauppauge. The subject site,
Raise your right hand.
I'm sorry,
Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
The subject site is 4.5 acres in size and presently has a restaurant with associated parking to the east. This building here. The proposed 2,100 square foot Sonic has been sited to the west within the existing wooded portion of the site here. Further to the east are shopping centers. On the opposite side of Middle Country Road is the Smith Haven Mall. To the south are single-family homes, and to the west is a vacant parcel and a recharge basin. Shared access to the property exists from Middle Country Road via the existing eastern curb cut and via a proposed two-way entrance to Alexander Avenue to the west.
Please, if you're going to do this, I will have to close this hearing. I'm going to ask you to be respectful and orderly. Continue. Go ahead.
Thank you. Although access between the two restaurants is proposed to be shared, town code compliant parking is provided for each of the two uses. 42 parking stalls are required for the proposed Sonic restaurant, and we're proposing 46. Proposed traffic circulation on the site is via either entrances that I described before with a counterclockwise directional circulation through the property. So for example, someone entering the site from here would enter in a counterclockwise motion and then have a choice of either entering through the drive-through here for counter service parking along the west side of the building or for drive-through service under a canopy located here. After service, they would exit counterclockwise out through one of the three access points described before. The project does not require variances from any of the bulk dimensional requirements of the town. There are two front yards on the property, Middle Country Road and Alexander Avenue. Both require a 50-foot setback. We're providing 57 feet to Middle Country Road to the building and 61 feet from Alexander Avenue to the proposed canopy. The outdoor seating is located 50 feet from Middle Country Road to the north of the building. The rear also requires a 50-foot buffer. We're providing 106 feet to the canopy. We're proposing to maintain approximately 60-foot wooded area to match the existing buffer to the east. That buffer area is proposed to remain wooded with the existing trees that are there. In addition, we're proposing to add a row of 23 evergreen trees along this south curb line to further screen the property. The evergreen trees are proposed to be 6 to 7 feet in height when planted. Grass buffers with street trees at a minimum of 25 feet in width are proposed along Alexander Avenue and Middle Country Road. The existing fences along the southern property line are proposed to remain to further screen the property. Upon completion, approximately 40% of the site will either be wooded or landscaped. The maximum permitted building height in this zone is 35 feet. We're proposing a building height of approximately 24 feet. The allowable gross floor area ratio in this zone is 50%, which would allow approximately 100,000 square feet of building. We're proposing only 4% floor area ratio for this site. The bulk of the variances requested have to do with signage. I'd like to discuss that for a minute. 9 of the signs proposed on the site that are not part of the variance are regulatory signs, such as stop signs at the exits, handicap parking signs, and do not enter signs. 32 of the signs, which is one of the variances, where one is permitted, are ground signs. The majority of those signs are not for advertising, but are associated with the sales. We have 22 menu boards, or point of sale, I'm sorry, drive-in menu boards and point of sale under the canopy. There's one drive-through preview board and one drive-through menu board located at the drive-through in here. In addition, there are 3 monument logo signs at the entrances. The other variance has to do with building-mounted wall signs, where we're proposing 7 signs. 3 of them will be on the building, on the tower of the building itself at a 20-foot height. Those are logo-type signs, and they're used for corporate identity. In addition, there are 4 building-mounted signs at 8 foot high for food display. The property will be developed in compliance with town site development standards. On-site storm drainage will be provided in dry wells contained on the property. On-site sewage disposal and water service will be provided in compliance with health department standards. The existing site is at approximately elevation 110, which is the approximate elevation of the properties to the south. The property to the east, however, is presently at elevation 100, and therefore will be necessary to lower the site by approximately 3 feet in order to interconnect the 2 areas, here and here. Site lighting is proposed, and we've provided photometric analysis. There will be 6 canopy-mounted lighting fixtures for the drive-in area in here, 7 pole-mounted lights, which will be no more than 18 feet high in compliance with town regulations, and 4 wall packs to be mounted on the building. All site lighting will be shielded to prevent spillover to the neighboring properties, as demonstrated on my submission. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Is there anything so far?
One thing, Madam Chair, if the board does approve sign variances and does approve the application, the planning department would recommend that there be mitigation, because sign pollution has been a problem in this town and other towns, and if there's a proliferation of signs or if they're too tall, there should be landscaping or architectural trade-offs to make it more harmonious with the rest of Middle Country Road, at least with the development that's been recent. Older development is, I think, what people would say is, not very pleasant, but the newer developments have been better.
Thank you. Okay.
And just that specific point, which is why Doug Haley, who is the Director of Design for Sonic, is here to address that issue if that discussion is going to take place. Now I'd like to call up Chuck Olivo to discuss the traffic and parking study.
Good evening.
Good evening. Just lift that up, yes.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Charles Olivo. I'm the owner of Stonefield Engineering and Design. I'm also a licensed professional engineer in the state of New York, and my business address is 20 Gilbert Avenue in Smithtown, New York.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the board, our office has had the opportunity to prepare a traffic impact study which has been submitted to the board for review. What we start typically with a traffic impact study is an analysis of the existing conditions. Now, I'm sure as everyone is very familiar with the intersection of Alexander Avenue and Middle Country Road, and very familiar with the fact that this intersection has changed rather significantly in recent years. Previously, this intersection was actually an offset T intersection with Alexander Avenue on the other side of the street, on the northern side of Middle Country Road, and operated as an unsignalized stop-controlled intersection. As a result of the DOT's improvement plan, as you continue along the Middle Country Road corridor, the roadway was realigned and shifted to the east, and that's why you see a bit of curvature in the road as you travel from south to north on Alexander Avenue on the southern side of Middle Country Road. And it was realigned to create a signalized intersection. Now, I'm sure that to some extent there's many mixed feelings about a traffic signal at this location, and many times a traffic signal improvement is somewhat double-sided in that it creates better safety and creates more mobility. In other words, now you can make full movements into and out of Alexander Avenue. But also as a result of that, it's not uncommon to find that when roadways are realigned and create connections with other retail uses, such as the Smith Haven Mall to the north, that roads tend to induce traffic. And what I mean by that is that more than likely the traffic on the roadway prior to the installation of the traffic signal was less than what it is today. And logically, that is because the access point now from Alexander Avenue to Middle Country Road provides better accessibility. So motorists learn that, and they're able to travel through different intersections as a result of these types of improvements. So we started really with looking at historically what has been the trends along Middle Country Road, the magnitude of volume on Middle Country Road. If you were to look at the traffic impact study and the general scale of traffic volume on the roadway system, Middle Country Road has about 25 to 30,000 daily vehicle trips that pass along that corridor. This is a major east-west artery as it travels through the town, certainly, and then continues east through the village of Lake Grove because of its accessibility to retail uses as well as certainly the residential homes that are located to the south in this area here. It also provides connection to Nesconset 347 just to the west. So there's the convergence of a number of major arteries in this area, and that's why you see that scale of traffic volume on the roadway system. Alexander Avenue carries more like 3,000 to 4,000 vehicles per day based on the traffic counts that were conducted and an estimation based on the peak hour. So where we start with the existing condition traffic analysis is counting the intersection during the peak hours of the day. The industry standard for looking at traffic impact is looking at a 60-minute period throughout the course of the longer commuter rush period during the weekdays, and then also certainly Saturday in this area. We would certainly be remiss if we didn't look at a Saturday analysis during the midday because of the traffic generation that's due to the retail users on this corridor. We also look certainly at the impact and the type of generation that's generated by this type of land use, a restaurant use, fast food with drive-through. And that type of generator, according to the industry and certain, as logic would dictate, typically generates higher levels of traffic during the weekday midday, the lunch period from approximately 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., during the weekday evening or the dinner rush and the commuter rush from 4 to 7 p.m., and then certainly on a Saturday during that, again, that lunch period, which also overlays with the peak hour of generation of the shopping center across the street. So we really focused and zoomed in on those peak periods during the weekday, the midday, and the evening peak periods, and on the Saturday during the midday period. And what we've prepared is a very extensive traffic impact study that shows those volumes and shows that traffic that's generated by the Sonic overlaid on top of the existing roadway conditions. Now, what's important to note is that this type of user, which is quite different than office or residential, office and residential uses generate new traffic to an area as a result of the sheer nature of the business that's done within the uses. As a result of being a fast food user, quality food service user, no different than any other restaurant along this corridor, there is a significant majority of traffic that is generated to this type of site as a result of the volume that is already on the roadway system today. And what I mean by that is that these types of retail users typically locate on major arteries because of the fact that the density of traffic is already strong and that there is a draw from that traffic rather than new traffic generation as a result of the implementation and construction of a site like this. This has been shown in industry standard publications essentially since the start of the Institute of Transportation Engineers as actual sites have been studied and published and reviewed, and the data shows that the large majority of traffic volume is already generated from the roadway system, especially during those peak hours. So what we've done is we've prepared a traffic study that looks at the trip generation of the site that is then overlaid on the roadway conditions as we have it today. Now, as Mr. Marinas explained, the access management plan of this site, and I'll go through that again in a little bit more detail, involves three primary access points. The first access point is located to the east which is the interconnection with the Costco facility. As you come in through the traffic signal, you're able to make a left turn or right turn or travel out of that shopping center and then through the roadway that's essentially located here and into the Sonic facility. In addition to that, there's a right-in, right-out access point that's proposed on Middle Country Road. This would only allow for right turn in movements and right turn out movements. We have had the opportunity to conceptually discuss this design with the Department of Transportation. It's not uncommon that the Department of Transportation looks at both the access on Middle Country Road and also the side street, as the jurisdiction of the signal itself is under the jurisdiction of the Department of Transportation. Typically, their jurisdiction extends back through the turn bays that are located on the side street, and so they have had some input on the review of the Alexander Avenue curb cut, which is proposed to be a full movement curb cut, and they believe as part of access management guidelines, this would be beneficial to the circulation of the site. You'd be able to have left turn vehicles from Middle Country Road travel down Alexander Avenue, then make a left turn into the site. In addition, you'd have the ability for any local motorists to travel up Alexander Avenue, make a right turn into the site, and continue on their way if that's the path that they're looking for. So as a result of the trip generation and the access management, what we then do from that point is we look to, as I mentioned, overlay those volumes and then study the intersection with regard to its capacity to handle any additional traffic that's generated by this land use. Now, if you've gone to this intersection, which I'm sure we all have, and you've waited on Alexander Avenue, you know that there's a cycle length, and what I mean by that is the green, yellow, red cycle length of this traffic signal is just over about 2 minutes long. And about 90 to 100 seconds of that cycle is given to Middle Country Road. Why? For the reason that I stated earlier, which is the sheer magnitude of traffic volume on Middle Country Road versus the traffic on Alexander Avenue. As a result of that minute and a half or more of delay and that red time that you experience on Alexander Avenue, queues of traffic begin to form during the red cycle of that phase. That is then dispersed when the ball is green and vehicles are able to complete those movements. As a result of the traffic signal implementation, obviously motorists are now not waiting for unsignalized gaps in traffic, essentially trying to find enough space to make that left turn or make the right turn in traffic. That's given to you now and controlled by the green ball. So there's a safety aspect of the improvement that's certainly important, and I'm sure was a large part of why the implementation of the traffic signal was to be. As part of the analysis that we've conducted, which overlays the sonic volume onto the roadway and the driveways, what we've seen is that there would be no discernible impact to the way that the traffic signal operates in terms of its capacity. There's adequate capacity on Middle Country Road and Alexander Avenue to accommodate the traffic that would potentially be generated by this particular land use. Certainly a large part of that is the ability to distribute traffic through more than one access point. One access point constrains traffic, only gives it the ability to move in and out of one curb cut. The goal here from an access management perspective is to really provide two primary access points along Middle Country Road, the state highway, the larger generator of traffic to and from this site, and provide one means to disperse traffic in and out of the site along Alexander Avenue, which would be expected to carry, based on the traffic volumes, a very low percentage of the traffic to and from this site, particularly during the peak hours. That really speaks to the off-site impacts or lack thereof. There would be no significant adverse impact to the operation of the traffic signal or the operation of these driveways, which would operate acceptably. With regard to the internal circulation, Mr. Marinas touched on this briefly, but I'll simply just reinforce what the proposal and how you would essentially drive into the site and some of the queuing that could be expected and handled on the site. As a result of the very deep throat depth of the Middle Country Road driveway access point, there's approximately 190 feet between your entrance point to the drive-in and drive-through and where you would be coming off the road from Middle Country Road. Now, using rough numbers, an industry standard really is about 20 feet of vehicle. So as a result of that, you can stack 9 or 10 vehicles in the area as you travel into the site. In addition to that, you have the stacking depth that's provided as you come into Alexander Avenue. That would also allow for deep stacking as you're traveling into the site, approximately 9. And then within the drive-through area, you would also have approximately 9 vehicles that could stack. So from an overall queuing perspective, what is being provided as part of this plan in terms of queuing on the site will be adequate to accommodate the expected demand to be generated by the Sonic. Now, as you travel in from those areas, those decision points, essentially whether to travel through the drive-through or the drive-in, there are one-way circulation aisles with angled parking stalls for both the drive-in curbside dining and then also simply to park and then walk into the Sonic. So you have what is a counterclockwise motion that you would travel in after you're exiting the site or looking for more drive-in or parking spaces. And then as you come to the end of the aisle, you then have the ability to make a left turn to continue to Middle Country Road as an access point to exit the site, or to continue to Alexander Avenue to access, to egress the site, excuse me. So we've worked very closely with the site engineer. We've worked very closely, obviously, with the project team, and we spent a significant amount of time studying the roadway system, studying the use and operation of the site. One of the things that I will mention about Sonic, having been involved in the construction and design of the Deer Park location, is that unlike other fast food users, Sonic looks to proactively address traffic management by having staff that are actually dedicated to the management of traffic on site. Because it can be somewhat of a new and novelty use in the beginning, the traffic management team of Sonic is well trained to quickly survey someone who may be hesitant or may not have been to the site before and be able to direct them through the site in a very efficient manner to make sure that the traffic operations operate effectively and efficiently. So there are a number of aspects of the traffic study that we have conducted with regard to off-site and on-site. Sonic obviously is very attentive to the needs and understanding of the concerns with regard to traffic. We also have looked at parking as a result of the parking proposed and the general demand experienced by Sonic. The parking that's being proposed on the site, the parking supply, would be expected to accommodate the demand to the site as a result of this type of use. So from a traffic perspective, on-site and off-site, and a parking perspective, the site would have no significant adverse impact to the adjacent roadway system.
Yes.
Are there any questions
Yes.
that I can answer for the board?
Mr. Bull.
Yeah, I have a question. The on-site queuing.
Yes.
Is that caused by the number of people that you anticipate to use the canopy area?
The queuing that I spoke of, the capacity, the queuing capacity is actually based on length. So when we look at the general lengths on site, there's the demand and then there's the queuing supply. What I spoke about is the queuing supply that we provided on site. And I just want to correct, I did misspeak about the stacking ability as you come into the site on Middle Country Road. That would accommodate about 16 vehicles. It's on the order of approximately 320 feet. So you have the ability to stack 16 vehicles as you come off Middle Country Road, 9 vehicles as you come off Alexander Avenue, and 9 vehicles within the drive-through before any parking is impacted. So those queued vehicles would not be blocking parking stalls, which I believe is a specific and rather smart part of the code that speaks about the ability to handle queuing without essentially blocking someone into a parking stall. So you'd be able to accommodate about 34 vehicles on this site that would not be blocking parking stalls.
Okay. The reason I asked the question is, I guess it was last summer driving down Deer Park Avenue. You had a lot of traffic queuing in the turning lane to enter. And it just, again, it was just a casual observation because I just drove by, looking like people were waiting to get under that canopy area rather than going in, parking, and going in to the restaurant itself.
I have had an opportunity to...
If that happens here, where is the queuing going to take place? On-site or on Alexander?
That's correct.
Or?
That is correct. The queuing generally at the Deer Park facility, based on my own observations and observations of the project team certainly, does at times occur in the shoulder of 231 as you're coming into the site. It's something that the Department of Transportation is certainly aware of. That full width shoulder really serves as a deceleration lane and somewhat of a queue stacking lane to be able to get into the site during peak times. It's certainly not used throughout the course of most days. On-site in the design that's proposed, those areas that I spoke about, that 34 car length, that would be able to be accommodated on-site if you happen to be waiting perhaps to pull into the drive-in area. There'd be over 34 vehicle positions provided on-site where you would not be impacting or on the shoulder of Middle Country Road or on Alexander Avenue, to answer your question. So that would all be on-site.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right. Yes. Go right ahead.
Of course.
And somewhere in the middle of your presentation, you had said that there would be no discernible impact. And I would just have to ask, what's meant by discernible? I mean, I think you normally speak in terms of seconds of delay.
Sure. And that can sometimes be a little bit technical and difficult to understand. But when we look at the level of service and delay in accordance with industry standards, there's a level of service scale from A to F, which is somewhat similar to an academic scale, A being the best and F being the worst. And then there's also the delay that's associated with that, which is the waiting time on average that a vehicle sits within a potential queue or at a red light of a traffic signal. In the industry, typically, when you have multiple changes of level of service, meaning if you were to go from a level of service C to a level of service E or F, that's something where the driver is now well aware of the fact that there's large increases in the delay that they're experiencing. What is being proposed here and as analyzed is on what I would say a very minor scale in terms of the incremental delay. In addition to that, when traffic signals are put in, very often the Department of Transportation times those signals based on giving preference to the principal artery. What we're proposing to do here, and this is not uncommon with private development projects, is that they bring focus to the traffic signal that the Department of Transportation might not otherwise have because they're managing an entire system of roadways and such. So what we're proposing is to try to reallocate time from Middle Country Road to Alexander Avenue to improve the level of service as part of this application. So this is somewhat of a roundabout way to answer your question, but what I mean by discernible is that there's not proposed to be a change in level of service as a result of this project.
Okay, thank you. Second thing is the driveway in the rear also serves the Ragazzi restaurant and the Costco and other building further east. Is that factored into the queuing for the drive-in? Because my fear is, or my concern is that this site isn't, the fast food part isn't standing on its own, so to speak. It's connecting with Costco and Ragazzi, and people trying to get in and out of those uses may be conflicting with those using the restaurant.
Well, it's certainly an interesting point. What we're proposing is to have that interconnection, which in terms of good planning, transportation-wise, it's certainly the DOT's access code and their recommendations. We're always looking for cross-access. And the reason for that is that it essentially removes redundant movements from the roadway system. In other words, if you were leaving the Costco, rather than coming onto Route 25, waiting in the queue, making a left turn, and then coming around to Alexander Avenue, now you'd have the ability to simply bypass that movement if you were looking to use both facilities. So it removes that demand from Middle Country Road and creates somewhat of a corridor behind the site that can be used to facilitate those movements. So it takes demand off of the major principal artery and creates more convenience and accessibility. Now, in terms of the ability to get into the site and the queuing, as I mentioned, that 16 vehicle queue would not impact the parking for the Ragazzi restaurant. If there were a number of vehicles that were waiting in queue, they would potentially be in the area of the farthest parking from Ragazzi's restaurant. Based on observations, the parking is generally relatively open during the peak hours of Ragazzi, and certainly when this use would be expected to peak. So I think there's a good synergy there. The goal here is to try to, again, remove those movements from Middle Country Road while providing cross-access opportunities. Now, with regard to Costco, certainly a heavy generator of retail traffic, they really have to stand on their own when it comes to the level of service that they create with regard to the backup on the roadway and the traffic signal. But certainly we've looked at the entire intersection and the volume as it relates to that intersection as well, and we believe this is an access management plan that would certainly work well in a future condition.
I actually, if I can ask you a third and a fourth question. From an alternative standpoint, did you look at the alternative of not having any access on Alexander?
Ladies and gentlemen.
I think certainly the access point on Alexander Avenue, as proposed, is a very important part of this project. I think to remove access completely would in many ways have a detrimental impact on how Alexander Avenue operates and the queuing that would form. And what I mean by that is, if you were not to have the ability to access via Alexander Avenue, that does not, it's a public street, and it's a public street intersection with Middle Country Road. And from an access management perspective, if you don't have the ability to turn into the site, you would now have to wait in the queue on Alexander Avenue to get into the access point on Middle Country Road. Is there the possibility to look at this driveway, certainly with the board's experts, and see if there's perhaps a restriction that could be placed to make it operate in accordance with some of the concerns? I think that's something certainly we can look at. But with regards to access management principles and some of what I think would be the consequences of closing it entirely, I think that would have a detrimental impact.
Thank you. The last question I have is, I think, and I realize, I'm not the board, but I think the way a board would normally look at this is not whether construction has a traffic impact, but whether the granting of variances has a traffic impact. So by that, I mean, how does the granting of variances worsen or lessen, or reduce the traffic impact in comparison to development by right? For example, an office permitted or a restaurant permitted with no variances, would that be comparatively better or worse?
Well, I think with regard to traffic impacts, what we look at is the size of the use and the trip generation that's associated with that type of use as a result. So whether this was a retail user, an office user, I'd really need to understand how large of a footprint you could build as a result of the zoning and the variances. But based on the proposal that's before you in terms of the size of the building footprint, I don't know that that would change in terms of the variances that are being proposed to be granted. So from a traffic impact perspective, that would not have an effect on the analysis that we've put forth this evening. Are there other as-of-right uses that could be built here that would have comparable levels of traffic? I certainly believe that there may be, but I haven't had the opportunity to conduct that analysis, something we could certainly do.
Thank you.
Okay. I think there's no more questions for the traffic?
No question.
Okay. Mr. Webb?
Okay, before Paul Boyce presents the results of the sound study, I just want to make one point. I'd like to note that the application requests that this board grant a variance from one of the special exception criteria for a counter-service restaurant. This criteria states that no outdoor loudspeakers shall be permitted except for drive-in windows, and that loudspeakers should not be audible from any residential lot. Each of the menu boards at the drive-in spaces has an interactive feature where a patron can speak to a car hop and place their order. This module is no different than the order module in the drive-in window. Special exception criteria specifically allows an order module at a drive-in window. The order modules proposed here at the drive-in spaces are no different. Additionally, as you will hear from Mr. Boyce, both from an evaluation of the technical specifications of the order modules, as well as from field data collected from the order modules actually in operation at the Sonic North Babylon site, no sound from the order modules will be heard from any adjacent residential property. Mr. Boyce?
Mr. Webb, can I ask you, how many more experts do you have?
After Mr. Boyce, I was going to call up Spencer Hart, who is the owner of the franchise, not as an expert, but to address some of the concerns that he's heard in his conversations with the neighbors,
Okay.
and then we're done.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you. My name is Paul Boyce. I'm a licensed and registered professional engineer in the state of New York. My place of business is at 630 Johnson Avenue in Bohemia, New York.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
My firm was contracted to perform a sound study for the proposed Sonic in Nesconset. Our study is twofold. We performed sound readings at the existing site in Nesconset, as well as readings of the existing equipment in use and in operation at the current North Babylon site for Sonic on Deer Park Avenue. I'd like to begin with the Nesconset site. All we did there was just go there to take some baseline readings on a relatively quiet period, which was done on the afternoon, or actually early evening, of June 16th between the hours of 6 and 8 p.m. What we did at that point is what we call a site walkthrough or site walkover. We just gridded up the site into roughly about 50 by 50 foot sections or areas. We took sound readings using a sound level meter to just document levels of sound that were occurring at the site during this period. And for the most part, we came up with readings in 60 decibel range, 60, 70, might have had a high spike here and there around the 80s. What that means is, it's a relatively quiet site at that time period. All right, we walked the perimeter, as I said, in 50-foot grids, and also the interior section, and specifically along the southern property line, which abuts the residential properties. Same thing. We got readings that were mainly attributed to what we heard as we were recording the sound, traffic on either Alexander Avenue or Mill Country Road. All right, after that, what our field technician did was set up the instrument so that it would record sound, or not record sound, but record sound levels once a minute over a 24-hour period, beginning roughly somewhere in between 7 and 8 p.m. on Sunday evening and carry through till Monday evening the following day, which I believe was June 18th or so. Again, we got relatively quiet readings. The instrument was set up on the southern property line for the proposed Sonic restaurant, about 100 feet east of Alexander Avenue. All right, again, we weren't there present to say what some of the spikes or the noises were that we got overnight, but we did get a few, not many. Most of it was below the sensitivity of the instrument, again, which supports what everyone knows, is it's relatively or generally a quiet neighborhood. What we then the next part of our study was to go to the North Babylon site, which is an existing Sonic restaurant here on Long Island, and document sound levels that are being produced by the operational or the point of sales equipment that they're using at the site. As you guys know, it's drive-in stalls, the drive-through. It also involved the outdoor patio, which is not going to be the same thing. They're not going to have that at the Nesconset, but we took readings from all that instrumentation that they have there. And what we did is just followed industry standards. We performed it on like a radial grid, and I believe Bram, the attorney, submitted our report. You'll see there's excellent pictures or diagrams to document the grid. What we did is based it on like a 90-degree arc around each speaker, and we did step-out readings at like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and 48 feet at varying heights and varying angles. And basically what we came up with is, if you're very close to the speaker, you'll be able to hear it. And we were getting, the sound instrument was registering decibels, okay? Very close to it, you'll see readings on the order of like 70 decibels, but that sound degrades rapidly as you step away. The basis of the study, we found that once you reach a distance of 48 feet, regardless of which speaker we were operating or what height or what angle from the position of the speaker, the sound instrument did not register any decibels, and the field tech could not hear any sound being emitted from the device at that distance. So what that says, if you go back to the site plan, you'll notice that the wrong site plan, sorry. Thank you. The closest speakers are in the drive-in stalls to the residential property line here are over 100 feet away. They're about 105, 106 feet from the property line. We didn't pick up any sound or hear any sound beyond 48 feet. All right. You notice there are a lot of speakers here. However, Sonic's operations, they can't operate more than 3 of these things at once. That's just their national equipment. It's all standard stuff. They can't physically have more than 3 of them going at once. And we did measure that type of sound. And we simulated that at the North Babylon site also, where we simultaneously operated 3 speakers and recorded readings along the grid. And again, same thing, beyond 48 feet, no noise, no sound. So basically, what the study came to say is, we don't anticipate, or there will not be any audible noise, sound rather, from these speakers at the property line, or what we believe is beyond 48 feet, which is well within the property boundaries. And there's also going to be a landscape buffer along that south boundary, which will also further attenuate sound. So with that, I just want to say everything will be in compliance with the town code, which specifies certain decibel levels during certain time periods of the day. You will certainly not see anything above 45 decibels as a result of these speakers at the overnight hours, which will be in compliance with the town code. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
Yep.
I have a question. I'm trying to read this here. It says Wisconsin will not have menu board speakers that have music in them?
I believe that is correct. They will not be playing, am I mistaken? You guys are not proposing to have music, outdoor music, at the Wisconsin site?
But on your Deer Park Sonic restaurant, you do have music speakers.
At Deer Park, they do have outdoor music, and it's very low. That was the toughest thing for us to register with the instruments.
Will that ever change?
I don't know. I don't think so, but I'd have to check with the owner.
The application for Wisconsin does not propose any music speakers.
Ever?
Ever.
Currently.
Currently.
Ladies and gentlemen.
There's no reason, but
Yeah.
we specifically did not propose those for this location because of the residents to the south. Again, it's not that it would make a difference because it's inaudible from really anywhere other than directly under it, but again, trying to be sensitive to the residences along the adjacent border, they're not proposed for this location.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any questions right now? Okay.
Thank you.
No? All right. Go ahead.
All right, and just again, as I said, I just want to call Spencer Hart, who is the owner of the Sonic franchise on Long Island. And briefly, look, we know this is a new kind of unique use, and we've been very sensitive to trying to understand from the community what the concerns are. I explained the community outreach program before. I won't go into it again. It's a little bit of a unique thing we're going to do now, but Spencer is the one who is there at these sites. He's responsible for Sonic on Long Island. He's had conversations with some of you either on the telephone or in person. And at the bottom line,
make sure you're addressing this board.
I'm sorry,
please.
pardon me. And the bottom line is that the concerns of the residents are important. We have tried to address those that have been explained to us in a reasonable manner.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chair
May-
and members of the board, thank you for the chance to address the board.
May I have your name, please?
Yeah, my name is Spencer Hart. I live at 10 Homestead Place, Harrison, New York.
Okay.
And I'm the
raise your right
franchisee.
hand. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, go ahead now. Yes, spelling of your last
H-A-R-T.
Okay.
I guess what I would just like to say, I know we have a lot of professional-looking people here, but this is a business that's run by my wife and I, and you know, I'm not, as Bram said, I'm not an expert, you know, here to testify, but I am an expert about Sonic because I probably, you know, have been at Sonic more than just about everybody in this room, and I fully understand the concerns that have been expressed, or that, you know, that I've heard so far and that potentially may be expressed tonight. You know, in fact, as Bram pointed out, that was why we made ourselves available to talk, and we did speak with some residents and heard some of the concerns as they expressed them. And you know, what I thought, what I wanted to just take 2 seconds to do is to kind of tell you what I think Sonic, you know, is and what it isn't. And you know, having spent a tremendous amount of time at Sonic, what I would tell you is, and I know we've had experts here to testify to this effect, but one concern is that, you know, people will be able to hear Sonic when they're not on. Sonic is a very self-contained entity. I think that, in my experience, when, and it's primarily from being at the one at North Babylon, which this one is going to be very similar. If anything, there will be one major difference, which is that we'll have indoor seating here and no outdoor patio. So in that regard, I think it diminishes a number of the concerns that people have. But I think, I'm very confident that no one who's standing anywhere, even at the outskirts of our own property, will hear anything that's going on within Sonic, either from the loudspeakers or from any other activity that takes place. It's a very, it's surprisingly quiet, largely because people are sitting in their cars or inside the building when they're eating the Sonic food. I heard concerns about potential aromas that would come from our restaurant. We don't cook anything under a flame. We don't, there are not any aromas that come out of our site in North Babylon. And, in investigating this because of the concerns that I heard and speaking with Sonic Corporate, they're not aware of any other Sonics that experience any aromas that disturb the neighborhoods. So I don't believe that that is going to be something that will in any way negatively impact the area. As far as, so people don't want to hear it, and I get that. They don't want to smell it. They don't want to see it. Our lights are designed to light the Sonic area, just like, I guess, any other retail establishment. We don't have any spotlights, any lights that are directed outwards or so forth, and I think that people will find that they won't see it either. And as we've indicated, just so that they don't even see the building, we're putting up evergreens, which, even during the winter, obviously, when the leaves fall, those leaves should continue to be there to block the site path. I've heard concerns about garbage, and other things that can happen from garbage being spewed around. My comment to that is a couple. One, we take great pride in our operations. And if anybody does go and look at the site in North Babylon, you will not find any garbage anywhere, either in the store or outside. We're different than many other retail or restaurant establishments. Very few other establishments have the ability to monitor their parking lot, to monitor their entire premise. We do have that ability because we have car hops who bring the food to the cars. Part of their role is to, identify any garbage that may be there. When it is there, they pick it up. We have plenty of receptacles on premise. People drop it when they're, when they're done eating, and go about their business. We haven't had any problems whatsoever in that regard at our Sonic. And then, the final consideration that I've heard is about traffic. What I would, in addition to what Chuck testified about, what I would, indicate on that is that I know, we talked about all the queuing that we can have on site and so forth. That's great, and we have that, and if needed, we will obviously use that. But, based on our experience, we won't need that. As a business person, I'd love to have lots of need for that queuing. But we have 22 stalls that cars can come in, and if we have a couple of extra in addition to that, they'll just kind of line up. And that's, that's when we do have any queuing in North Babylon, that's what we see. It's great that we have 16 plus 9 other opportunities to queue up cars, but that has not been, what we've identified as something that we would need to do, for this site. And so, what I would just, what I would say is that we want to be very good, responsible members of the community. We would love to become a part of the Smithtown and be there for a very long time. I do think that, looking back, if we could jump ahead 12 months and people could look at the impact that we had on the neighborhood, I don't think that any of the concerns that people have today, while I understand them, and it's hard to know what exactly is going to happen, I don't think that they will ultimately come to pass. And I think that we will be, we will coexist very nicely. And, finally, what I would just say is that Sonic is a family-oriented establishment. Unlike many fast food places, it's one of the few that actually attracts more women than men. I think that's because there's lots of kids that go. It's not a hangout place. We don't find that people are hanging out there and waiting. People come, they order their food, they eat their food, and they kind of go on their way. There's a friendly environment there, And we patrol it very carefully, both, you know, by the car hops that we have there. We also have a camera system set up that monitors our entire premise, and that can be viewed both from within the restaurant and remotely. We haven't had any safety concerns or issues, and you know, we've had a very good coexistence with the residents and the businesses within North Babylon, and we'd love to see that happen as well in Smithtown.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Is there any other questions that you would like?
I have a couple questions.
Okay. Mr. Weber?
I guess I can ask Mr. Weber. You have to excuse me for not knowing exactly how Sonic works. But does Sonic have a model that does not have loudspeakers? Do they have, say, a touchscreen model, or do they have a model that does that they've used in other areas where sound is a concern?
Okay. The answer is no. For ordering purposes?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, that was one question. The other question I had was, I noticed that according to the site plan, a lot of this was kind of designed so that there were no additional variances. And one of the things I noticed is that there exists a possibility of maybe moving this development slightly further north towards Middle Country Road and giving us the ability to increase that buffer to the south and maybe mitigate some of the issues that I perceive would be there.
I just wanted to defer to the site plan engineer to answer that question.
There is a 50, right?
There's 57. No, north. This is east.
Take the front.
Looks like it's certainly something that we can look at. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to speak out of turn, but it's certainly something that we're willing to look at.
The only reason I asked that is because if that were the case, it would kick off, I believe, some additional variances that would prohibit us from closing the hearing this evening. And I personally would rather see that, where we were impacting the commercial district a little bit more than we were impacting the residential.
Again, to a certain extent, there might be an ability to do it without impacting other variances. Again, it's something we'll take a look at, I guess, when as the residents speak, and we'll see. Maybe we'll come back at the end and see if we can address that. But like I said, you know, we are willing to look at certainly reasonable suggestions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay. All right. Before I call anyone up, we need to change the tapes for the television, and then I will start calling people up.